As Nigeria prepares for the 2027 general elections, one thing is clear. The call for reforms is no longer a distant ideal. It is a crucial necessity. From low voter turnout to disputed results and outdated processes, the challenges in Nigeria's electoral system continue to undermine the credibility and indeed sometimes public confidence in response. The Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa will be launching two critical documents on the 19th of June aimed at charting a new path forward. The first is the We the People Memorandum, a citizen-led blueprint for electoral reform developed through nationwide town halls and grassroots engagements. The second is the Legislative Engagement Report on laws assented to by the current administration, developed in collaboration with Legis 360. Together, these reports ask hard but necessary questions. Should INEC be insulated from executive influence to safeguard its neutrality and independence? Can electoral technology, when fully grounded in law, reduce litigation and restore voter trust, increase voter trust? Is Nigeria really ready for single-day elections? What will it take to implement them successfully? And how effective has the current National Assembly been in lawmaking, oversight, and impact? These are the issues that will shape the 2027 elections, and tonight we are taking a closer look at what must change, how quickly, and who must lead this change. The journey to electoral credibility stands now, and the roadmap will be on the table this June 19th. I am Ezenwawagu. Welcome to Electoral Reform Half Hour on NTA News 24 Abuja. This program is brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PACA, with support from MacArthur Foundation. Our guest tonight is become a regular. Samuel Folorenshaw, an ICT professional, AI specialist, and cyber security expert with over a decade experience in digital democracy, civic technology, and election observation. He is the founder and CEO of tech firm driving innovation in government through AI and data analytics, and the creator of Legis 360, an all AI-powered platform that simplifies access to legislative information. Formerly with Yaga Africa, Samuel led groundbreaking digital democracy initiatives and has consulted for many organizations, some of them like Econet, Jonapid, and the many organizations which has led to digital transformation. He holds multiple certifications in cloud computing, cybersecurity, and data analytics. And it is my pleasure to welcome Samuel Folorenshaw to the program tonight. Sam, good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. So how has it been for you? How is the preparation for 2027 elections?
Yes, it's. I think it's firstly it's a sad thing for the country that we're already talking about 2027 elections, because if we talk about it, and it seems it's now becoming a norm that we only have 2 years of governance. And if you even look at litigations and election petitions issues, we practically have 1 year of governance, and we're already looking into elections already that is supposed to happen in 2 years. So are we saying governance should suffer for the rest of the tenure? But it's something we will look into in depthly, and that is why we've analyzed laws that would help us get there.
So one of the documents to be launched with the People Memorandum calls for insulating INEC from executive influence. And, especially in the appointment of chairman and national committees, did that improve public trust and operational neutrality?
Yeah, one of the recurring issues we've seen around electoral reforms is how the leadership of the commission has always been appointed, and the constant thing we've seen, and like in the case of Adamawa in the 2023 election, we saw how that has come to play, because you cannot continue to appoint partisan individuals into a role that requires them to be neutral. And that is why the memorandum has spoken to allowing for a joint committee to be in charge of hiring and appointing people into these elective positions, appointive positions in the commission.
So the memorandum emphasizes, embedding electoral technologies into the legal framework.
Yeah.
And how does this what kind of specific language, or indeed legal framework, does it propose to ensure that tools like BVAS and electronic transmission are not, deployed, but also admissible and enforceable in post-election disputes?
Yeah, if we look at Section 65, subsection 5 of the Electoral Act, which talked about the transfer, in the previous act and in the current act, it only mentions transfer. Now we are proposing that it includes transmission of the result directly to the collation center, as well as to the IRF platform electronically. So that solves the concern about this platform is just for viewing purposes and not for collation. So the language that is going to include now is going to include to be transmit directly to the collation center. And that is a proposal which will greatly affect.
So even if you transmit, will it collate?
It doesn't collate.
So in real terms, what difference does that
the
make?
difference it means now is that it now makes it official. It makes it admissible for collation. So the conversation around it not being admissible for collation is now being removed if we get this memorandum passed.
The memorandum is also talking about the promulgation of the Electoral Offences Commission, and people are talking about whether we can take it away from the Attorney General, the influence of INEC, and all the rest of it. In your view, do you think these laws will be 17 years in the National Assembly? Do you think it would come to light at any point in time?
Now, that's for it not to come to light. We are looking at the players here. Because who are the people that propagate electoral offenses? Who are the people that instigate them? It's still based on the politicians. So it is now, if this is an issue that we have agreed as a nation that we want to remove, because we've seen issues of electoral offenses and electoral violence being perpetrated, where INEC could easily identify the people that the perpetrators of these issues, but they don't have the power to go ahead and prosecute. And that has been a loophole that they've constantly exploited. However, with the introduction of BVAS and the likes, now snatching of ballot box doesn't really make sense anymore. It is now for you to disenfranchise other voters, like we saw the issue around Lagos. Lagos during the governorship elections that was widely politicized. So I think it would do Nigeria a great deal if the Electoral Offences Commission can be set up, and it can be set up correctly.
Yes, so correctly is
Yes.
the key thing. So how do we insulate it from politicization, especially its offices and administration?
I think it goes beyond getting the law passed, because that's one of the things we've constantly talked about, is like we need to go beyond reforms. After reforms have been done, how do we ensure that we hold these institutions accountable? Because that is where the key issue is, holding them accountable, following up. And we need to, civil society organization, concerned citizens need to follow up on these reforms after they've been passed, after these laws have been assented, to follow up and ensure that these things are done correctly.
Diaspora voting has long been in the front burner, and there are proposed safeguards to protect its integrity. Yeah. What do you think really? How do we help? Because the mechanics of it is where the challenge is. I know that you're very versatile, and then because there is the internet voting, there is the electronic voting conversation. Many people don't know the difference. And how can we profit and make sure that the vast population of Nigerians who live in diaspora, and when we talk about diaspora, we also Sudan, and Niger, they are all part of the diaspora. So how do we get this population into our electoral magnet?
Yeah, as the case of diaspora voting, I've always said it has to go hand in hand with early voting, because that is where the diaspora voting will be conducted. And the technology that we are going to use in conducting early voting, how we manage early voting, is the same technique we are going to apply to diaspora voting, whether it's happening earlier or it's happening here in the Nigerian soil, or whether it's happening across the borders. So it is actually important, because if we look at our population, migration is something that is inevitable. People will move, but that doesn't stop them from contributing to the economy or the activities that is happening in their country. So I feel, and I've always advocated for diaspora voting and early voting, because diaspora, but we need to get it right. We need to get the technology right. We need to get the processes right.
What is our tele-identity? How much of internet? Because, like I said, unpack the internet thing and the electronic. What's the difference? A lot of people say, oh, when people say electronic, they don't understand what they are talking about.
Okay.
Are they talking about internet voting, or they are talking about electronic?
No, I think the last time I was on the show, I tried to unpack it a bit. But when we talk about electronic voting, it is not internet voting. It is not e-voting, and that is why it is not called electronic. Transmission of results is the use of electronic devices to transmit results directly to the collation center, which is still going to be done manually. So introducing technology to our elections is to help us facilitate and to speed up the process, and to also safeguard and lock up bottlenecks and loopholes that has been existing.
But is there anywhere where people have surrendered their processes completely to technology?
No, it is not even advisable to surrender your processes completely to technology.
So do you see the strategic use of technology such as biometric authentication and electronic transmission of results as a viable means of reducing post-election litigation?
If we talk about post-election litigation, and that has been conversations that have been in recent times, it is where is this post-election litigation stemming from? The things that technology will help us solve is election day technology litigations that stem from election day. So technology can help us drastically reduce that in terms of overvoting, for instance, case of these polling units have been overvoted, in terms of, like, if we get the laws around electoral reforms around the electronic transmission of results, so we won't have issues around manipulation of result from polling units, for instance. So that aspect of our elections, that phase of our elections, I strongly believe that technology can help us mitigate those risks, those concerns.
We'll be going on a short break, but before we do that, I want you to, talk more about this diaspora voting. How can technology, because you didn't really, how can technology leverage? How can we leverage technology to advance? Because we can't continue to, keep away this vast majority of our population. Can technology be of use in doing that? Just shortly before we...
Yes, technology will play a big role, and INEC have to also look inward into its technology. Firstly, you can't even vote outside your polling unit in Nigeria.
Is the law?
Yeah, it is the law. The law has said. So we also look at because that law might also affect diaspora voting. So that law first needs to change before diaspora voting can happen, because if we say,
because you have to register
where you want to vote, exactly. So that law first needs to change for us to be able to. But in terms of using technology to facilitate that process, we can get there.
Excellent. Now we'll go on a short break, and when we return, electoral reform half hour continues shortly. Stay with us. Glad to have you back. We're still speaking with Samuel Folorunsho, lead innovator at Legis 360. Sam, in the legislative report that we're talking about that we would be presenting on June 19th, how many bills has the 10th National Assembly introduced since its inauguration, if that's not an examination for you? And how many have successfully passed third reading?
Yeah, so we can't speak authoritatively for the National Assembly, but over from our own tracking and analysis, the National Assembly has introduced both the Senate and the House over 3,000 bills on the floor of the House has been read for at least first reading. So if you also look at what to the data on how many has scaled third reading is still very not clear, which is not something we would like to speak on authoritatively, but we can also give data like it was reported on Democracy Day. The House reported that they've get 51 of those laws of those bills assented, while the Senate said they've gotten about 19 of those laws assented. So if you look at it, overview, it's still far from the number of bills that have been introduced on the floor of the House.
So how many have been, by your own tracking, I'm not just talking about, because we have to have some independent, when people are chest thumping, we have to have some independent. How many have been signed into law, and do you have any noticeable pattern as to which kind of bills are assented to quicker than the others?
Yes, from our analysis at Legis 360, we've been able to successfully track over 40 of those laws that were assented by President, which is contained in the report that will be launching on Sunday. And there are key noticeable areas that we've seen that the policy direction of this administration, which are the likes of education, because we've seen a large percentage of those laws that were assented, over 50%, are geared towards education, establishing federal universities and polytechnics, for instance. But we've also noticed something, that the President has also assented to some laws that were passed, not in the previous administration. That is some key things that we've also noticed. We noticed some changes in the areas of judiciary, for instance. There are laws that are passed concerning the judiciary that we will talk about later. But we also saw that there are laws strategically in the security and defense sector, like the establishment of the Control of Small Arms Act, and the DICON that was established by. So we are seeing some key changes in how
but I think one of the bigger trusts is the economic laws.
Yes.
And what makes this interesting is that we have more of rather than acts, you had more executive orders. It appears this administration is much more interested in ensuring that it legislates what could ordinarily have been an executive order into. Is that something that you have also been able to track?
We've noticed drastically that this administration is focusing on legislating rather than issuing executive orders, because one thing they've done separately from the last two administrations that we've had in the country is that they've done things more through the National Assembly. The processes is something we can discuss later, but they've done things more through the National Assembly than their predecessors. So that the Buhari administrations, for example, focus more on issuing executive orders, which really doesn't stand the test of time, because laws could stand the test of time. It will require another legislation to change those laws and to amend,
to alter.
Exactly. So we've seen this administration move in that direction to get laws enacted. So the concerns will now be, for example, we've also seen symbolic laws that doesn't really have, from our own analysis, that doesn't even really have, that wasn't geared towards national development. Like, for example, concern around the national anthem laws that was enacted. So their concerns, policy experts have said this doesn't really get towards any national development. It is a symbolic act. Why do we have to return to pre-colonial anthem, for instance? So we've seen those patterns, and those patterns are richly discussed in the report.
So beyond lawmaking, what has been the quality of oversight, such as committee investigation and summons that we have seen? What clearly that demonstrates serious legislative scrutiny of the executive, really?
One key committee stood out in our analysis, and that is the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Reps. In April, they reported that they've recovered over 61.5 billion naira from the oil companies, and that is a very significant amount to recover. But the question lies, what purpose? Where are we repurposing this money that we are recovering? Where is it going to then? That is where we demand a bit more transparency from our legislators.
Do you think they provide timely and accessible information on their activities? Because it will take a June 12th for us to know, but shouldn't this be something that citizens can have off the cuff?
Yeah, one of the legislative agenda of the National Assembly, from reading their legislative agenda, is to have a functioning e-parliament. But we've not seen that come to fruition, and that is why platform like Legis 360 is coming there to bridge in the gap, where you can find bills, motions, petitions to be able to further your advocacy, know your rights, know the laws that are being passed on your behalf. But in terms of timely information, yes, we've seen, and maybe it is not widely politicized. We've seen them having channels on WhatsApp to post laws and bills that are being read for the first time, but it is not enough. We believe that the National Assembly could do more in terms of providing timely updates, access to granular data for analysis, for instance. Because one of the bottlenecks we've had at Legis 360 is chasing this information, and we have to chase them hard.
So what did the report recommend to improve legislative transparency and public access to legislative work?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations in our report is, especially around transparency and access to data, is for the leadership of the assembly to also embrace solutions like Legis 360, for instance, to be able to provide this support to the assembly. Because one of the things is that we understand that the assembly is busy, there's a lot of work to be done. But in terms of access to information, timely reporting of legislative activities, they are a bit lacking.
So as we close, what political civic strategies are necessary to ensure that the most urgent reforms are passed before 2027? Quickly.
Advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. I don't think we can override the need for advocacy. Nigerians have to involve, especially when the constitutional reforms are now going down to states. That is where the advocacies are needed more. The conversation needs to leave the national level and move to the state level, especially the House have said they will be moving into July.
Thank you, Sam. This is where we wrap up.
Thank you so much for having me.
This episode of Electoral Reform, half hour, and we wish to especially thank you, Sam Folorunsho, for your time and contributions on the program today. I'd like to shake my guests.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Electoral Reform half hour is brought to you by Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PACA, with sponsorship from MacArthur Foundation. We are live every Saturday from 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. with a repeat broadcast every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. on same station. Thanks for watching. I'm Ezenwawago.